So I introduced Adria yesterday, and many of you have met him, so I don't need to go through a long introduction here, but today he's going to be talking about an additional project he's been working on. And so the title of this one is Predictive Modeling. Well, okay, I've got some immune responses to come back for pylori infection. So you really see the breadth of things that he's done as a graduate student. Of course, the question I have then is he going to have anything new for us on Monday?
Well, you're going to see a lot of that, let me tell you. All right. How are you guys doing today? Ready? All right, so the story of today is a little bit different than from yesterday. Yesterday we went over the CD4 B-cell differentiation model, which was pretty much an intracellular model. So we evaluated how different cytokines bind different receptors and then how the intracellular compartments change. Today I'm moving one scale up. So today I'll be describing a computational model that's at the cellular scale. So in this case we won't be dealing with intracellular molecules explicitly, but what we will do is we'll describe different cell types, macrophages, dendritic cells, epithelial cells interacting with each other. And the context I'm going to be talking about that is in the context of H. pylori. A little bit of an outline. I'll introduce you to H. pylori, great bacteria, by the way, such a nice guy. Then I'll be presenting you the computational model, and the approach we use is we used a complementary approach for this model. We constructed an H. pylori infection model based on ODE with Copacid, but then we moved to over there with NEC, and we implemented this model in NEC, and we also ran some simulations. You're going to see that when I present the ADN part, you're going to see some figures that were in Stephen's presentation, but I'll be going down in the immunology, so it's great that you covered all these technical aspects, because those are the ones that I'm not so sure about. I'll be going over some results and also, again, some hypotheses that we generated and then how we went back to the lab and validated those. Talking about sensitivity analysis and then discussion. All right. So what is H. pylori? H. pylori is a spiral-shaped gram-negative microaerophilic bacterium that is found mainly in the stomach of humans and other species. It's a very dominant member of the human gastric microbiota, and it has been persistent for decades after infection. So this is a very, very old bacterium that we've been harboring in our stomachs. Just to give you an idea about the story of H. pylori, I think it's a pretty cool story. In '79, there was this Australian scientist, Robert Warren, that observed a spiral-shaped bacterium in the stomach that he did not observe, he hadn't observed before. And he was really trying to culture this bacterium over and over the years very unsuccessfully. It was not until 1982 when Dr. Warren and Dr. Marshall heard that, and as the coolest things happen in science, they happen over rotation when you leave some things in here and then I go on rotation a couple of days, and then when I come back, whoops, I got no penicillin, or I couldn't. That never happens to me though. So anyway, after going Easter vacation, they came back and they found H. pylori colonies with petri dishes with very specific culture directions they liked. These results were published in 1984, and what these two people were trying to demonstrate, the scientists at that time thought, the ulcers that you get in the stomach are not caused by H. pylori. They are caused by the stress of the person. That's why you're getting all these ulcers. Warren and Marshall were convinced that that was because of H. pylori. So I think it was Marshall who did that. For this publication, what he did was he drank a bottle of H. pylori. He felt sick. He got all these ulcers. And I know all of you would be willing to drink a bottle of H. pylori culture. But he gave antibiotics to himself, and then he proved that all these ulcers, when they were cured, they were because of H. pylori, because of all the stress that he'd been And that was published in Lancet in 1984. Now, it was not only 10 years after, in 94, when the NIH recommends a triple antibiotic therapy to treat H. pylori. And I'll be getting into this therapy in just a bit. And then for all this work that happened all over these years, the Karolinska Institute awarded the Nobel Prize of Medicine to Horschel and Warren for their discoveries in H. pylori. So I think at the end of the day, it was kind of worth to drink the whole bottle. I would say. All right. 50% of the human population in the world has been estimated to harbor H. pylori in their stomach. So if I just go like this and I draw a line in this class, statistically, how of you guys would be harboring H. pylori? And now you're saying, oh my God, what's going to happen to me? Some numbers I need to give you is that 85% of these 50%, you just go and you just have the symptomatic infection. No symptoms, no ulcers, nothing. 50% of these 50% will develop peptic ulcers, mild lymphomas, or adenocarcinoma. And now the question you may have is, okay, why just 15% and why 85% of these 50% of the human population just has a symptomatic infection? And this is because the H. pylori is pathogenicity islands. So H. pylori has this pathogenicity islands, and there are several ones in their genome, and there's one that has been very well studied, which is CAK, the cytotoxin-associated gene A. It's the main virulence factor for H. pylori. So what H. pylori does is when it wants to infect an epithelial cell, for example, as I'm representing here, it injects CAK, and then this injection triggers the whole immune response, and that's what triggers the ulcers and the dysregulated mood response, etc. So what if you have H. pylori? That's a fancy picture of me dressed up as an envy. But what if you have H. pylori? What if you have an ulcer and you go to the doctor, what are they going to prescribe to you? The treatment for H. pylori is to just completely eradicate it. And you will get a triple therapy based on a proton pump inhibitor, that's omeprazole, and then you have 2 antibiotics, erythromycin, and also amoxicillin. That's the most common treatment for H. pylori if you go to the hospital. The question that I want to ask today is, okay, when you get these antibiotics, you are pretty much clearing a lot of your microbiome. So is it really a good idea to wipe out all the Helicobacter strains with these antibiotics? Is it really a good idea? And the reason why I ask this question is because we hypothesize at some point, can H. pylori exert any health benefits? And there's a huge debate right now on the microbiome and the antibiotic resistance as well, and how the microbiome also influences our immune response and our capabilities to fight against different pathogens. In the lab, we run a study where we infected mice that were obese, was a diet-induced obesity study, and we infected mice with 2 different strains, just normal H. pylori CAK positive strain, and then we infected another group with a strain of H. pylori that was mutant for CAK. So it's a non-pathogenic H. pylori strain. And what we observed is that these mice that were obese, if we check the percentage of cells infiltrating in the white adipose tissue, in black, the strain that was CAK negative, or that was a mutant for CAK, had way more Treg expression and less F480 positive, CD11B positive concentrations. When we challenged these mice with a glucose challenge, and then we let the mice normalize these glucose levels, what we observe is that this line here, these are the mice infected with the CAK mutant strain. So these mice were able to normalize these levels of glucose way more rapidly than the mice infected with CAK positive strain or the uninfected mice. So what this data is telling us is that, yes, an H. pylori that is pathogenic, we need to get rid of it. Is the antibiotic treatment the best option? Because then we are not getting these health benefits. Can we find a strategy so we can still wipe out these CAK positive where we can like fight these pathway positives, but keep the good guys, the bacteria that will observe the health benefit. So as you can imagine, we built a computational model to start answering these questions. And this is a cell designer representation, and it has 4 different compartments. And this is what Stephen was showing. Now, the 4 compartments is the gastric lumen, and this is where H. pylori is really. Then we have an epithelium. We have a gastric lamina propria where a lot of action happens. And then we have an induction site, which is the gastric lymph node, which are located next to the stomach, and this is where the T-cell priming happens. So let me just to give you a summary, 44 species, 43 reactions, these 4 compartments, and then this model is driven by 19 ordinary differential equations. In the case of EOE, I'll show you also the agent-based approach. So let's take a deeper look on what are the events happening in this model.
So these reactions in a specific cell like the epithelium, are these all the reactions that happen in that, or some reactions that you specifically chose to show this model?
So these are in the epithelium. Yes, oh, sorry. So what Shivani is asking is if in the epithelium we are just representing the reactions that are related to H. pylori, or if we are representing something like epithelial cell differentiation or other biological functions.
Yeah, and also like if there's like all the H. pylori reactions in the epithelium, or did you specifically choose some reactions to show this model?
Yes, she's asking if we chose specific reactions. We had to. We try to, and I'll be going over these reactions, we try to implement as many reactions as we could for H. pylori. So for example, here the epithelium, you can see how H. pylori can replicate in the lumen, it can also be degraded. H. pylori, for instance, in the epithelium, immature dendritic cells here can sample from the lumen these H. pylori antigens, and then they can activate dendritic cells in the gastric lamina propria. We also included the fact that once you adopt a chronicity, or not chronicity, but once the epithelial cell is more grows, is broken, H. pylori can actually translocate in the lamina propria. We also represented that, and we also represented how H. pylori can infect an epithelial cell, and this epithelial cell that's infected will be an epithelial cell that's damaged and will start exerting some effects into the gastric lamina propria. So we try to comprehensively describe most of the reactions in the epithelium. Yes.
What are the light green lines for each? Good question.
So in this model, we represented light green for activation reactions, and then you'll see some red lines, and those were the inhibitions. And then the black lines are the state transitions afterwards. All right, the lamina propria. Once H. pylori infects, we have, if you remember correctly, these are the effects coming from the epithelial cell, the damage infected epithelial cell. So these damage will start activating T cells in the lamina propria also, and this is mediated through different cytokines. Dendritic cell and macrophage activation, some dendritic cells in here. Also the H. pylori that gets into the lamina propria here can actually be phagocytized, or the antigens can be phagocytized by the dendritic cell, and it can activate the dendritic cells. Macrophages can also get some H. pylori, and also H. pylori can replicate in the lamina propria. So again, we're trying to comprehensively characterize different reactions that are related to H. pylori. Last, in the gastric lymph nodes, we are priming the CD4 T cells. So we have these NT, and I remember talking to Julia, we were talking about how NTs can be primed, so this would be an example. And NTs are primed through different phenotypes, and then these different phenotypes will translocate into the lamina propria, and they will also exert different functions based on the cytokine. Also, T cells that are in the lamina propria can translocate into the lymph node to mediate all these T cells. And now the question, you may have is how you differentiate the, yes.
That was a question about the general model that we have over there. So if you look at stability represents the immune response, which
It's a comprehensive representation, but I'm going back to what I said yesterday. There are some other processes that may be happening in the gastrolaminar protein that are not represented here. So these are the processes necessary to mount a basic immune response. Exactly. So some parts of this response need to be left out because of data for calibration. This is something that Steven was pointing out. At some point we had to stop adding stuff. Yeah. All right. So for to tackle this approach, we use two different strategies: the ODE strategy and the APM strategy. So for the ordinary differential equation-based modeling, this is ideal to model deterministic processes. And what is deterministic? A deterministic process, you have these variables in your equations that will represent an average concentration of the various components of the model. So you can have 100 T cells. The concentration will be the average of those 100 T cells. Also, spatial differences can only be tracked using the compartment that we were showing you yesterday. So we can have a gastric laminar propria, we can have a gastric lymph node, and that's how we separate different compartments. And also, premier estimation in ODE is a very automated developed process. So we have the algorithms, we have all the tools in place to run premier estimation if we have the data. On the other hand, we have agent-based modeling. Agent-based modeling, as Steven was saying, is ideal to model stochastic processes. Also accounts for individual behavior of the components, whereas the ODE is an average component. So in agent-based, you can check what an individual cell is doing. So you can check out of these 100 T cells, you can check what each one is doing. Also, it takes into account spatial-temporal dynamics using neighborhood algorithms. And this is something I tried to show you here. So this cell here will sample the neighborhood. And based on what this entity feels in the neighborhood, it will change the state, for example. It will remain in the same state. The problem with agent-based modeling is, what Steven was pointing out, is that premier estimation, it's not an automated process. It needs to be run in a trial error kind of thing. Sometimes you need to go back to the ODE, which is what we did, and I'll be getting into that in a second. But there are no automated, mature strategies at this moment. So we have two different approaches that we used. We had the ODE differential equations that we used with Copasi, the agent-based modeling that we used with Anisi. And we believe that these are complementary types of modeling that can be used sequentially. So that's what we did. We used first the ODE, and then we moved into the APM to ask more questions. And now the question you may have is like, okay, great, we have all these models that you can implement into Copasi, and we know how to do that, setting up all these reactions. Now you can imagine how many parameters, how many 0.1s, right, that we have to put in this model. How do you get these data? So this is another example. For the CD4, we went in the literature and we decided to start putting pieces together and get a big calibration database. In this case, we found we had the need to run our own experiment to get all this data for model calibration. So what we did was we set up a time course study and we infected the mice with H. pylori 26695. And we run different time points at 0, 14, 30, and 60. And each day we optimize a different group, and then we assess by flow cytometry what are the levels of different cell types in these tissues. So with that, we put together a calibration database, and that allows us to prime the calibrated. Yes,
I would like to. This is an important point for me. So, what are your considerations? When do you find that you cannot mine to require data for only assembly or whatever it is? what were your criteria to do this in-house and gather your own data?
So Vernon is asking what led us to run the experiment instead of getting all the data from the literature. I would say there were different reasons. One of the reasons is that there are different strains of H. pylori. So you have a European 26695, an African isolation from the J99, you have an SS1, you have a mouse-adapted SS1, different strains. There's some variation on the kind of immune response that goes into that. So that was one part of the variation that we were not very happy to input in the model. The second thing is that it's really hard to find time course data. And I was having this discussion with someone yesterday. Modelers, my top modeler will always prefer time course data because you can check what is the exact dynamic of your response. And of course then the computational people will tell you, okay, can you please sample at day 3 and 5 because maybe we're missing out. That was the second reason. And also, since there are so many things that we want to test, macrophages, dendritic cells, the H. pylori, with this study, we were also able to re-isolate the H. pylori. So we infect with one dose of H. pylori. Days 14, 30, and 60, we get those stomachs, we homogenate the stomach, and we reculture, and then we can re-isolate, and we can say, okay, we got this much back from the stomach. So these are numbers that you can also plug in for the different H. pyloris that you have in the model. So I think that with all that, it was more efficient just to run a 60-day study rather than adding all these variables.
But this was after you assembled the network in cell designer, when you knew what you were going to look in the in-house study.
Yes. So we first assembled that, and that is when we started looking, and then we said, let's just work. Yeah. Yes. No agent. Yes. I'm just focusing now on the OE. Yes.
Maybe a technology question. You said that you have 4 compartments,
Yes.
and based on my understanding, when we do OD modeling, we talk about compartments are every single group of items that have interaction with other items. Is it
Compartments. A compartment is your delimitation. Oh, the question is, what is exactly your compartment in the ODE if it's everything that connects together, all the species that connect together. So a compartment is a spatial delimitation you give to the model. But that doesn't mean that cells in one compartment cannot be interconnected with cells in another compartment. That can happen.
Because I think that when I see the model, I see 4 layers of modeling rather than 4 compartments. And I think every single type of cells are compartments. I don't know if I'm right or...
Yeah, no, you would see what she's asking is if a cell has its own compartment.
Right.
You would see, no, it would be, all your lumen is one compartment. And within one compartment, you have different cell types. Yeah. All right, so the first thing we saw with the model is that CD40 cells proliferate as a result of the interaction with H. pylori. And I'm going back to what we said yesterday. This is what our data was telling us as well. We had our TH1 and Treg upregulation after infection. TH17s were upregulated, not as much. This was in line with the data where we saw the Tregs in the spleen. We saw how the infected mice were upregulated and the other ones, and at day 30, TH1 was also upregulated. But this was more like a check issue.
So I had a question. In the model itself, the various compartments can be integrated in capacity that can cross-talk between what happens with a particular cell type in one compartment versus the other. Can you do that?
Yes, Shamir is asking if we can model in composite the same cells in different compartments. And if-
Together.
Yes. And the answer is yes. The only thing you need to do with composite is in the compartment section, you will need to specify the 4 compartments. And then, for example, if you have a CD4 in the gastric lymph node and a CD4 in the LP, those would be 2 separate species. So you will need to have your CD4/gastric lymph node and your CD4/LP.
To do.
Yeah.
So when you have the cell number on the y-axis, is it the cell number from each of the compartment? Or the cell number for all the, say, T cells or the Th1 cells?
These, she's asking if the cell numbers represent just cell numbers in one compartment or cell numbers as a result of the same type in all the compartments. These ones are in the LP. And as I said to Shamira, you will have different species. So for instance, your CD4 T cell in the gastric lymph node, it would be zone node protein in corpuscle. Another complete different node would be your CD4 in the LP. So you're able to track what you want to show or what's going up, what's going down.
So when you did the data calibration, you did use the flow cytometry data to get these cell numbers?
Yes.
So in your model, the volume of each compartment, is it physiological representative or is it just,
It's set up at 1.
it's set up at 1? Okay,
Yeah.
and the number of cells is that is representative of what you get from the flow cytometric data?
Yes, she's asking if what are the numbers that we set up as fixed in the compartment as volume, and then if that's representative to the volume of the tissue that we extract. The reason why we set up 1 in the volume is because with this model we didn't want to model volume differences. That's why we set it up at 1, because at the end of the differential equation multiplies the volume just to adjust and normalize. So we just set it up at 1. And then for this model, we did not account that the gastric lymph nodes are smaller than the stomach, which is bigger. Yeah.
So would you expect to have more cells in the real-time scenario compared to from the modeling perspective?
We saw more cells, and that's why we also checked on percentage of, for example, the total CD4s, trying to normalize these numbers. In the LPO, we found more cells, for instance, more differentiated CD4 T cells having the gastric lymph node, for example. Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Then we move to MIEP, and I'll go back to the ODE in a second. But in MIEP, we had a similar network. This is what Stephen was presenting, and again, we modeled the mucosal responses of the GI tract triggered the presence of H. pylori. And I want to point out something that Dr. was saying, which is how do we parameterize the ADM model? In this case, what we did was we had these reactions, and we have a parameter for our ODE model that works. Of course, the architecture of an ODE and an ADM, ADM works with probabilities and propensities. ODE is deterministic, so we have to make some adjustments. So what we had here is that in the ODE, we had a pretty good starting point. And then with this good starting point, we just run, I think it was up to 7 or 8 iterations, since we found a parameter set that worked well to show our experimental data in ADM. So I wanted to show you this because I think it's important to know that ODE can run your parameter estimation, and then your ADM can get as a first starting point your ODE-based parameter set, and then it's just a matter of running different iterations which makes it more efficient.
What are the rows again? Sorry, it's high. What are the rows?
The rows are the different parameters here. So some of the parameters, and I just selected some of them because it would be not really hard to see. But these are some of the parameters, and this is the description of which reaction is this parameter involved.
Is the interactions between things?
Yeah, so that would be your case. And this is the value that had in the ODE, the iteration of the value, and then the final ABM.
And when you say iterations that you said it can't be really automated, so it's you manually put these values in, or?
These is a result of parameter estimation in capacity, which is the automated process. Then these values are put back in ABM, and then, for example, let me give you an example here. This empty value was 0.001, and we saw that this is the upregulation of these cells. So when we first run the initial iteration, we saw that these cells, for example, were not upregulating as much. So we had to upregulate this value by the power of 10. So we had to keep doing that just to be able to feed the data. But of course, we are starting here. So if we started somewhere else, like way far in the actual value, it would not be as efficient.
Okay, will that bring iterations if we manual estimation?
The iterations were a run of the model and see where things go, and then change parameter, run it again, see how things are evolving. And we did these for 8 times.
That change parameter, is that automated? I guess the question is,
Oh, no, okay. Your question is if the parameter is changing automatically?
Yeah.
No, this is in ABM, this is something you need to do manually. That's why the process of parameter estimation in ABM is not that mature, because this is something you need to do manually, yes. All right. This is a heat map representation of the different concentrations in ABM of the different species of the model. And for the time, just going to skip to the next one. And here you can see how, similarly to what we saw in the capacity model, we have an upregulation of DH1 over time, and also an upregulation of DH17 in both the LP and the gastric lymph node. And here you can see the stochasticity of the ABM. And also we saw an upregulation of Tregs. We work with different T-cell specific PPAR gamma and myeloid specific PPAR gamma, and I can get into that this afternoon, but for sake of time, I'm not going to mention this here today. And then one of the things we asked is, okay, is H. pylori exerting its pathogenicity, its pathology in a dose-dependent manner? And what we did was, okay, let's initialize the model with a concentration of H. pylori, let's say 1x, and then let's initialize the model with 10x, 100x. And that would be the H. pylori that you put in the lumen that's swimming freely in the stomach, in the gastric lumen. And what we observed is that with DH1s, when we give just like X dose of H. pylori, and I think that was 5 times 10 to the 7, if I remember correctly, we had a DH1 response, but this DH1 response was upregulated when we gave 10 times more or 100 times more. And with DH17, we observed how with 10 times and 100 times more, this was also upregulated. There were no differences between the 10x and 100x. So with this, we predicted, okay, DH1 responses will be H. pylori dependent. DH17 responses, they will be as well, but we will not be able to discern between 10x or 100x. So with that, what we did was go back to the lab and run another H. pylori experiment, but with different initial concentrations of H. pylori. And these are the results here. We have our T-bed, and this is percentage of CD4 T cells, and we are representing T-bed and interferon gamma. This is for TH1, and also RY gamma C for TL17. And what you guys can see here is that in 10 to the 8, the 1x dose, if we increase that by 10 times and 10 times, or 100 times 10 to the 8, this goes up. And that's very similar to the amount of interferon gamma that we are getting out of these cells. In the case of RY gamma T, there is no much difference between these two. This one is spiking up, which is, this is more in line with what we saw, and then we have to investigate a little bit more what was happening here, because these two were together and this one was spiking up. Another thing that we checked was sensitivity analysis, and this is a task that I haven't mentioned yet in capacity. But what sensitivity analysis does is it checks how critical different nodes in your model are in relationship to different reactions. And let me give you an example. Here we were checking which, this is an EC ADM and this is OEE. And here we were checking the main causes of the transition of a healthy epithelial cell to a damaged epithelial cell. So a healthy epithelial cell that's not secreting any pro-inflammatory factors versus an epithelial cell that's secreting IL-1 beta and IL-15 into the system. And what we observe is that at early stages of infection, once we reach HP really plays a role here in red, triggering that transition of epithelial cell to a damaged epithelial cell. However, at very end points of infection, that's at 8 weeks, the effect of T cells and these M1 macrophages over this transition is way, way, way greater than the effect of H. pylori. Similarly, the ODE, we run the model to 60 days, and this is the sensitivities at day 60 of the conversion to a pro-inflammatory epithelial cell. And we observe here how these Th17 cells, these T cells in here, these T cells in here, these macrophages are promoting this transition to epithelial cell damage. So what this is telling us is that, well, at the beginning, yes, the H. pylori will affect the epithelial cell, and of course, that GAG insertion will trigger pro-inflammatory cytokines. But really, at the end, when you have a chronic infection with H. pylori, what is really driving this pro-inflammatory state in the epithelial cells is not really the bug itself, it's the pro-inflammatory response that has been triggered because of this first reaction. We've had some dendritic cell activations, including all these cytokines, that triggers T cell expansion, that's a positive feedback loop that goes to macrophage differentiation, all these pro-inflammatory factors in the gastric lamina propria. And that's what's triggering this cell infiltration and this epithelial erosion. Yes, Marcus?
Go back one slide, please. So just in the frame of modeling, the left panel is done with an EC,
Yes.
and the right panel is from ODE, and combining them, so the right panel would represent one column of the time that we did with this,
Yes.
right?
Yes, so Vern is asking if the right column here represents just one time point. Yes, it does. And this is day 60, and the reason why we modeled for day 60 was because we wanted to get the farthest point of chronicity to be able to pick up the effect that was pointed out with the ADM.
And this would be considered as a quality control validation, that you will get the same predictions with an EC for various factors, and if you do this on the ODE side of opacity, so that's how you check the multi-scale models.
Yeah, Vern is asking if it was kind of a quality control to have the same predictions in different platforms. The answer is absolutely yes. Yeah. Okay, so now I go, we of course wanted to validate this. So what we did was set up another experiment. In this case, we infected mice with PMSS1. We let these mice live the bacteria for 30 days. At 30 days, we collected stomach and spleen collection just as a baseline. And then at 30 days, we started a treatment with a group of mice was treated with PBS, another group of mice was treated with metronidazole. So what this metronidazole is doing is just clearing up all the H. pylori that these stomachs have. And this would be an antibiotic treatment. So by this day, what we were trying to see is that what are the effects of the immune response, and does the presence of these H. pylori here, based on these groups would have H. pylori, these groups would not have any H. pylori, does that play a role in the immune response at day 60, which is where we've seen these chronicity effects. And what we observed is that if you check at day 60, these are the PBS and treated with metronidazole. The immune response on interferon gamma was pretty similar, and also the IL-17 producing CD4 T cells, that was very similar as well. So what this is telling us is that H. pylori is actually not triggering this inflammatory immune response that we see here at chronic stages of infection. And the reason why is because even when you don't have H. pylori because you've been treated with metronidazole or the mice have been treated with metronidazole, you're still upregulating your IL-17 or your interferon gamma. So you're still mounting up this immune response. So now I go back to the medical treatment. You are a patient with a chronic infection with H. pylori, and the MD is telling you, all right, let's treat the H. pylori, let's wipe it out. What these results are pointing out, and this is a very hot debate right now, is, well, here we are missing a huge effect that is based on Th1 cells, Th17 cells, M1s and M2s, and this inflammatory response underneath in the gastric lamina propria is driving a lot of these pathological reactions. So what do we want to treat? Do we want to treat the H. pylori, or do we need to calm down and try to modulate the immune response? And this brings me to one of my last slides, which is these results, what they are highlighting, and we've done some work towards this direction that I think Dr. Basagania will be presenting on Thursday, is we need to find a better, more targeted approach to reduce the inflammatory response triggered by H. pylori. So maybe if you're a patient with chronic H. pylori infection, maybe really you don't need to target the bug itself. Maybe what you need to target is the immune response. So you are aiding the immune response to clear the pathogen. Right, and some discussions and conclusions. Our results support that CD4 T cells are crucial players for the development of H. pylori systemic gastritis, and this is something that has been very developed by other groups over the globe. The OB modeling Vermeer estimation strategy helped to assign Vermeer values to the ABN, so it was a more efficient process to match the ODE value to the PD. Our modeling results informed the experimental setup and analysis, and that's when we were targeting, for example, 60 days with or without H. pylori or different doses with H. pylori. Also, health sensitivity analysis showed how the immune response is the main driver for this epithelial cell damage at the chronic stage of infection. And last, the validation studies treating with the metronidazole actually validated this one. Showed that at chronic stage, we may be dealing with a more, if you want to call it immune-mediated disease, immune-mediated disease rather than pathogen-driven disease at this chronic stage of infection. And I think that is my last one. Yes. If there is any questions, I hope I have an answer. Yes.
So this is kind of a question about when you use an antibiotic in your system, since you're using the market, when you start using antibiotic again.
Yes.
So in your model, you're using it at 3 days.
Yes.
Have you ever tried, accelerating the process and say, I know that your patient after 7, 8, 10 days, and then see whether or not you see, rather than see the plateau phase of the cells and
So what she's asking me if we've tried to give the antibiotic at the very beginning so we can kind of like prevent this inflammatory immune response to go up. We haven't, and the reason we haven't is because we wanted to prove that all this inflammatory immune response was up and that there were no differences. At the end, that was our hypothesis. And this goes back to the human treatment. If I drink a bottle of H. pylori right now, in 5 minutes or 2 hours later or 3 hours later, I get the antibiotic, I'm good to go. The problem with this approach is that once you start getting the ulcer, how long has it been since you've had H. pylori for a stomach? Or maybe you take the deep ulcer, but maybe you had a small ulcer that you haven't detected in a long time, so you're actually a chronic patient. So it's kind of like, when can we like detect that?
one of the reasons I'm asking is I'm thinking about maybe stages of the patient in the other agents that have I know it was environment.
this same system of sensitivity analysis translated into a different scenario with different pathogens where you can also see these upregulation or these different responses. Yes, you could. Yeah. You could use sensitivity. If you have like a model of influenza infection, for example, you could run the same approach of sensitivity analysis and see if you see it. Yes.
Yeah, could you just, I couldn't quite catch the process where you were doing this comparison between agent-based models and ODE models. In that particular thing, I think you said that you're comparing at the 60-day mark.
The sensitivity analysis?
Yeah, the previous one. Yes, this one. Yeah, I think if I understand correctly, the numbers on the right-hand side are the correlations that you get after comparing the ODE parameters and agent-based parameters after the 60th day. Is that correct?
No.
Okay.
What this correlation means, this is how much these species here are influencing the transition of a healthy epithelial cell to a pro-inflammatory epithelial cell. And sensitivity analysis, and there's that works with these numbers in here, which are based on a delta function that runs on the background.
So these numbers are like from agent-based, like are you comparing, what I'm trying to understand is, are you comparing some distribution that you're getting from the agent-based models?
This is just ODE.
Okay.
This just assesses this transition of epithelial cell reactions. Yeah.
Could have run it for the other days. We didn't show it.
So using either ODE or ABN, how is it possible to predict modeling of multi-agent systems, let's say upon infection?
So what he's asking if with models like this we could predict immune responses of co-infections. Yes, but then you would need to represent, for example, if you get infected with HIV and influenza, or with like Clostridium difficile and H. pylori at the same time, yes, but you need to represent both pathogens and then assess which are the reactions that these two pathogens are involved in.
That still would be independent, right?
It depends. There may be some pathways that are common for both of the pathogens. But again, you will need to add granularity to your model and really go deep on what is one pathogen doing versus what is the other pathogen doing. And then if there's any common pathways that are
For just a second. First, let's thank Adria for a wonderful presentation.